Well, it's wonderful to have you here. I am going to take you on a whirlwind tour of our collection. It's something that I periodically think about in the scope of everything. We're so focused day to day on using the collection and doing strategy and all this kind of thing that sometimes you forget to step back and think about how I got here. And it was the collection that really drew me to the Mariners Museum in the first place. So to start out, I'll give you a little bit of my history, how I got here, and then we'll launch into a little bit about the collection. I was getting my graduate degree in historic preservation. Whoops, I went the wrong way. I knew I'd do that, sorry. And we're off to a flying start. See, this is what happens when you do the first thing after 24 years. They don't tell you you hit the wrong button. So I was working on my master's thesis in 1987, 88, and I was really intrigued with the Chesapeake Bay racing log canoes that you see on the upper bay. These are around Tillman's Island and that sort of area. And I was working on those for 2 summers, learning how to sail on these, how they worked and everything, and building my thesis around that. So I'm in school in Tennessee and trying to talk to people in Tennessee who are more focused on barns and main streets and this kind of historic preservation, and to talk about boats and to take some of that similarity of architecture and translate it over to boats. They were lost, and so I kind of skated through a little bit, I think. But I spent 2 great summers at the Calvert Marine Museum, and in the late summer of '89, I finished my thesis, and I was getting ready to head back to school in Tennessee, and the curator there, Paula Johnson, said, you know, you really ought to go down on your way back to Mariners and just stop in there and look at their small craft collection. I think you'll be really impressed. So my brother came up, and we drove down to Mariners and came in here and went straight to the small craft collection, which was out in the back. And this is sort of what it looked like. It wasn't black and white in those days. It was, but that was how it was arranged. And we went through, and I was absolutely blown away with the breadth of the collection. I hadn't really ever seen boats from Polynesia up close and from Tanzania up close. And I started to look at some of the craft that were there on the floor and realize the similarities with the Chesapeake Bay racing log canoe. So we left that night, we came back, we spent some time in the library and archives, and went back to the Small Craft Center the next day. And I got back to school somewhere around the 4th or 5th of September. I had a month to have my thesis in, and I ended up writing another 125-page chapter, putting the racing log canoe into a much wider world, comparing, if you notice on some of these pictures, these outrigger boards here. If you've seen the little canoe that's out in the Small Craft Center now, the Moana boat, the Korkor from Micronesia, the same kind of system to balance the boat and the pressure on the sail there is present in these craft. And so I was intellectually challenged to, like, I cannot not mention this. I've got to include this in my thesis. And so for a month, I sequestered myself in a closet at my parents' house and wrote this chapter and sent it and got it all done, got out in December of 1989 with a degree. Was really pleased with my thesis, and I thought, man, I got to go to work for the Mariners Museum. I really, really want to work there. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that was not to be. It was another 10 years before I actually had the opportunity to come here and work. My first job was as a curatorial assistant at the Peabody Museum of Salem in Salem, Massachusetts. So from somebody that grew up in Alabama and went to graduate school in Tennessee, it was quite a cultural shock to live and drive and survive the 9 months of winter in New England. But they're 2 really similar institutions with similar collections, and I really cut my teeth on the collection there at Peabody, and brought a lot of that expertise here to Mariners. And so in 2000, I had done an exhibition at Peabody on boats, and this institution was looking to do something with an international small craft collection. And so after the third or fourth round of getting a letter from the Mariners Museum, hey, why don't you apply? We'd love to, the position's open. I did apply. I flew down. My luggage got lost. I applied for a job wearing a pair of jeans I'd been wearing for 2 days and a Hawaiian shirt that I'd been wearing for a day and a half, and hadn't had any sleep. And I remember interviewing with John Hightower, and I was great while they were asking me the questions, but then when I asked them questions and I was having to listen to the answers, it was like looking down the wrong end of a pair of binoculars. It was really hard. Walked out and left half my stuff here at the museum, and they hired me anyway. So, but it was a dream to come back here to this museum because of the richness and the depth of the small craft collection, and that's what really attracted me here. And so it was after I got here and had been exposed to the depth and the richness of the collection at Peabody, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit as well, that I started to see the amazing potential of what this institution held and how little of it we were actually using, and how much of it was in storage. And so there's still things in storage that we haven't seen, that we haven't pulled out, that we haven't used, that we haven't thought about. And, we always throw the number around that we've got 35,000 objects and 1 million negatives and books in the library and archives. But it's when you really start to look at the individual pieces and you start to see all these things together that you realize that the depth of this collection is very unique, and only a couple of other places in the world actually have something like this. And so I was really pleased that I had made the decision to come here to be the curator of small craft. And it allowed me also to grow and to do different things. I was the curator of maritime arts and culture for a while, and then something else, and then took on the role of vice president of collections and chief curator. And so I've been able to work down in the weeds over 35 years. I've done close to 40 exhibitions. And I think what we're doing now and the direction that we're heading now with our collection is really, really exciting. I think after you do exhibitions for 40 years, you get sort of in the routine. The subject matter changes, but the routine and how it goes together and the complexity of that starts to get a little bit rote. And so you don't bring always the A game to that process. And so what we're doing now has really reinvigorated me, and it's very exciting because I've never done anything like this before. And we are really making it up as we go along to some degree. Although, what you'll see tonight, we're actually going back to our roots in many, many ways. And so it's quite exciting. A few years ago, after we did our strategic planning process in 2015 and began to the turnaround of this institution and really see ourselves as community-based, collections-focused, community-focused, 24 years. You're getting the A game tonight. We started to kind of survey the collection in a way that we looked at where everything fell and what kind of themes does our collection actually support. And we started to look where we had really thick clusters of not only objects in the collection, but stories and crossover between different types of objects that went to a Navy story or went to a Chesapeake Bay story or went to a recreational story. And we came up with 6 or 7 major themes. And then we also started to look at these areas and segments of the collection that we have sort of termed collection or centers of excellence. And these are parts of the collection that we are known for, have been known for, and are becoming known for around the nation and also now internationally. In our library and archives, we have an amazing photographic collection. We have the Chris Craft collection. Now, some of these, like the Chris Craft and the Monitor collection and a couple of others, cross over. There are things, there's a great depth in the library and archives, but there's also three-dimensional pieces in the object collection. A new collection that we sort of began about 22 years ago, which is the Modern Multi-Hull Archival Collection. And we've got people right now at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, who are building a documentary, a lot of which is based in our archival collections and will be based in our boat collection that's starting to come out. Of course, the Monitor, obviously things in the tanks back here and the Monitor Center, but also a major archival collection. We have probably one of the largest and most complete collections of ship registers in the nation, and if not, also in the world, in our library. Our International Small Crafts collection stands alone. There is not another collection in the world that is like ours. From the get-go, Archer Huntington designed this collection and assembled this collection to be international boats. The first 5 boats, 4 were from Portugal, 1 was from Spain, and 1 was from Lake Maggiore in Italy. And he wanted that collection to grow, to be international, so that people could come here and see all of the different variety of boats that you might see around the world. Our figurehead and ship carvings, ship ornament collection, our fine arts collection, our decorative arts collection. We have an incredible archival and 3D collection of objects and things associated with Admiral Lord Nelson. Some of you may remember the Nelson's Touch exhibit that was back here a number of years ago. We have an exceptional navigational collection. The Peter Iflin Nautical and Scientific Instrument Collection is a major part of that, and there are all kinds of instruments for airplanes as well as ships that deal with navigation from the earliest times until the modern. We have an incredible ship model collection, not only just with the number of models and the quality of models, but we have 2 collections within that collection. One is the Augustin Winifred Crabtree collection, and then the Adney collection of canoe models. Unheard of, unparalleled anywhere else in the world. These are things that when we are at the Council of American Maritime Museums conference every year, the International Congress of Maritime Museums that meets every 2 years. These are the kind of things with our peers that we're talking about. And this time, when we were in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, people are asking us and are surprised about the fact that, oh yeah, well, we've got a couple of boats from Portugal. I was having a dinner with a director at a museum from Portugal and was blown away that I knew what kind of things she had in her museum, and we had a really interesting conversation. And so through our collections, we are being known throughout the international maritime world, and part of the ship models is part of that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in particular in just a minute. We have an amazingly deep America's Cup collection, from the AC-72 to objects from the Yacht America. We just were given a couple of years ago the builder's model of the Yacht America. There are drawings and paintings and all sorts of things from that in the collection. Very, very deep and well known. And one that you might not think of as a center of excellence, but we have one of the most complete and amazing collection of ship anchors. So the museum is not going anywhere. We are well anchored in the community. I can say that because our director of conservation is not allowed to pun during the month of October. We do this in case he's watching to make him twitch and everything a little bit. So, but those, and this is not an exhaustive list, and actually I was looking at some stuff today, the sailor's arts, knot work, things that sailors do, scrimshaw and that sort of thing. We have an incredible collection. Tattoos, we've had people coming through today all day long from a tattoo convention that's down in Norfolk, looking at some of our early 1930s tattoo equipment and tattoo designs from a tattoo artist from Norfolk, all part of the sailor's arts. And that actually, when you look at all of those individual things put together into sort of a sailor's arts collection, it's actually a center of excellence for us. So as I said, there were 4 of us this time that went presented at the International Congress of Maritime Museums. This is an organization of our peers from around the world. We have, Howard and I and others have spoken over the last 3 congresses. The first that we sort of reintroduced the Mariners Museum in 2019 in Stockholm to rave reviews, and we even had someone from the audience raise their hand and volunteer to be on our board. And we're like, thank you very much, let's talk. And sure enough, he's now on our board and serves on our collections committee. So we considered that a pretty resounding first success for us in the international realm. We did present a couple years ago in Halifax, and then 4 of us went back and we presented this time in Amsterdam and Rotterdam. I had a session that I chaired and spoke as well. Howard did the same. You see him here. He had the illustrious duty of holding up the 2-minute sign for directors who were speaking to let them know that they had 2 minutes to go. And oddly enough, when they had 1 minute to go, he started playing a George Strait country tune in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands, with people from all over the world. It was a really strange mix of cultures there, but for Howard, it worked. So I presented on one aspect of our collection. I was one of 8 speakers who talked about ship models, and we had people from England and Portugal and around the world, Stavanger, Norway, and a couple other places, talk about the ship models in their collection. And I had spent several weeks putting together this presentation, and when I got up, I mean, there's only a limited amount of things that you can actually say about how to use ship models in the museum. We all kind of do the same sorts of things with them. And so I used my time to actually sort of take my presentation and summarize what everyone had sort of said, and this is what we are already doing in the Mariners Museum. And I used the builder's half model of America as sort of a metaphor. And if you know what a builder's model is, it's a half model, but it comes apart. And instead of using a set of drawn plans to build a ship, they take the measurements straight from the model, scale them up, and they build the ship from that. So this model, George Steers actually built, and these are called lifts, and each one of these lifts comes apart, and you can take the measurements on the top part and the bottom part, do all that. And so he built the Yacht America, which goes to England, wins the 100 Guineas Cup, and is now known as the America's Cup. By the way, New Zealand is ahead 4-2 in the America's Cup over Ineos Great Britain, so probably be over tomorrow, if not Saturday, with New Zealand defending. So that was free. So what he did was talk about all of the different aspects of what makes a story from an object. So you have archival resources. You can look at it from the perspective of art and craftsmanship, from material culture, from the community engagement, and also from lived experiences. And so this is something that, there we go. Oh, 2 minutes, sorry. This is something that we have been working through over the summer for all of our objects, for any object, and have come up with this sort of infographic. And let me walk you through it a little bit. We talk about objects and images as being conveyors of stories, and that each object has a story to tell. And so what do you do if you've got a boat that we don't know who made it, we don't know where it's from, we don't know really how it was used? The museum just got it in the 40s, and it was from someplace exotic like Burma, and there it is. So what do you do with it? Does it actually have a story that's useful? Why do we have it? Why have we held on to it now for 70 or 80 years if no one knows that information, if it wasn't gathered at the time that it was collected? And so we started to think about all of the things that go into making a story and finding out what a story is. And so the easiest thing, and this is material science, and so that's where our conservation department comes in. They can look at everything, they can tell us what materials it's made of, like the boat from Burma. We can look at it, it's a type of teak wood that's native to a certain area of the Irrawaddy Delta. We can look at archival sources in the library, and that adds a particular perspective, as does the material sciences. And then we have something called material culture, which I'm going to get into a little bit in a few minutes. And then we talk about, that's all collections based. That's the kind of work that we do behind the scenes to build the body of knowledge about every piece in the collection. It's exhaustive work, takes a lot of time, it's very complex. We end up with questions that we can't answer. We had a boat for years and years and years that was misidentified, and we just happened to find a postcard for sale at auction that had a picture exactly like the boat that we have. It unlocked every question that we'd had about it for the last 20 years. Bang, it's done, and we move on. And so from the community focus side, there's two really big things that a lot of places don't really focus on. One is, what is the value of any piece in our collection to a segment or the community at large? A museum has to be about something and has to be for somebody, okay? Our number one audience are the school-age kids, the 3rd grades, the 5th grades, the 7th grades, really from 1st grade to 12th grade. And we look for these different segments and we design something for them. Gallery 4, which you've seen, the Mediterranean's got the big map on the floor and the boat and the navigational instruments and all of that. It's really geared towards the 3rd and 4th grade classes. And that's why we've seen growth over the past 2 or 3 years, because more and more people are coming here, more and more people value that. So we're providing something of value from our collection that actually means something to somebody. The lived experiences, we can tell you what wood that boat is made of. We've got all these archival sources that tell us how it was used, how it was made, all these different sorts of things, maybe even pictures of it, motion pictures. We can do an assessment of the individual object, the boat, through a material culture process that tells us a lot of information. All that really gives you one perspective. It gives you the perspective of several people at the museum. The curators that have been associated with the Mariners Museum have done that research over the last 90 years. And that one person that comes in who's never been here before and sees that and says, oh, I was on that. Those things are fantastic in a swell. They're great in a storm. It's a very well-built boat. Or I sailed on that ship. This is my experience. It turns the entire perspective of something that's in our collection that we say it's 12 feet long, it's made of teak, it's this and that and the other thing, and actually lends an air of authenticity about it that actually makes all of that other information meaningful. And so it's about collecting the stories of the lived experience. And each person that has been on, say, the SS United States or the SS America has a different experience. People that cruised in the 50s with John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe and Winston Churchill are going to have a different experience from the people who cruised on the SS United States later in life or in its life. or have been associated with it in the last 20 or 30 years that it's been sitting in Philadelphia. But all of those lived experiences are just more data and more information about that one object that we can then incorporate into the overall story of that object. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's a harpoon, if it's a boat, or if it's a photograph of the SS United States. So this, for us, is all of the major components that go into actually, this is what a story from an object is all about. So, let me talk to you a little bit about what is material culture. And this has been an adventure for us over the last 10 months. I've been training our curatorial team in a theory, a process called material culture, and it's studying objects. And it's really using a observational skill, looking at an object, asking questions about it. And this is a boat. This came in. It's the smallest boat of the first 5 that came in from Archer Huntington in the 30s. It's called a Casadera. And it's in the Small Craft Center. You've probably walked right past it, never focused on it. It's over in the little culture section there. It's a nice little boat. It's got interesting shape. It's just there. So I figured let's dive into this, and we spent weeks and weeks out there looking at it, measuring it, photographing, asking questions about it, and really trying to figure out what is its story, what does it have to do, why is it here, why is it important? Well, what is material culture? It's both a simple answer and a very complex answer. Simply put, it is culture, which is ideas, anything that's immaterial, made material. So any object that you see, a boat, this camera, this figurehead, this is a material representation of some set of ideas of the person who made it. Okay, he made it for a reason. He made it out of a certain type of wood. It was for a certain purpose. It's of a certain person in this case. And all of that is information that's there for someone to take a very methodical process and ask major questions. So anything that is made by a human is actually material culture. And it's really the purview of a museum that has objects in a collection to do that. And most times you'll go to a museum of cultural objects, and they use the object simply as an illustration for a point that a curator or somebody else wants to make. It's like an illustration in a book, but you don't really learn about that piece. And I'm gonna not pick on the Mariners Museum, but I'm gonna pick on the Mariners Museum and an earlier curator. How many of you seen the model of the SS America that's in Gallery 9 all the way down that way? So a couple, okay? So if you look at the label text, the label panel is this long by this high. It's got 4 paragraphs. There's only 2 small bits of information that tell you anything about the model. Everything that's written about that tells you about the actual ship, okay? So, but the model has its own story. The model has its own characteristics that have nothing to do with the ship other than the fact that it's a scale representation of an actual ship. That model never went to sea. It never carried any passengers. It doesn't have an engine. Looks like it does, but it doesn't. All the information about that tells you that the scale of the model, 1/4 of an inch to a foot, and who made it, which was the model shop at the Mariners Museum. Well, a lot of people will walk in and assume that it's the little model shop that's over here in the corner. Well, it's not. When the museum was founded, a model shop was also founded at the shipyard. And so that they got the people who understood ships and could build them most accurately, that's where a lot of the models in the collection were made, right? But you don't learn any of that story about that particular model there. And so that's where material culture kind of comes in and helps us with that. And really it comes down to asking 5 or 6 basic questions. Who, how, what, when, where, and really most importantly, why. And so with this boat, we're looking at a very different craft made in Ilhavo, Portugal. This is a painting by one of the people that helped Archer acquire this boat. It's the actual boat. We've been going back and forth between what we think we see in the painting based on and what's actually existing in the boat. And we're always asking why, and always asking why. If you haven't asked why at least 5 times, you're not doing it right. Okay? And so the idea is to get down to why it looks the way that it does. Why was it made the way it is? What about this is unique? What's its story? And we came across something that really stood out. There's no other boat in the collection that has this. And it may be a little bit difficult to see, but on each set of ribs, there's a scarf joint right here, and then it's on this side, here, and then it comes back to this side, and then it's over here, and it's over here, and then it just alternates. And you can see here's the joint here, and this is a solid piece right here, and the joint is over here. Never, ever in 35, 36 years, I've never seen a boat built like this. So we are trying to look at what's there in the boat and figure out why in the world it looks like. Who would build a boat like that in the first place? Why? And it's obviously something that's very particular. It's obviously something that has to do with the way boats were built in this little area south of Aveiro, but we could not figure it out. Absolutely could not figure it out. So on a wild hair, we had written the Maritime Museum in Lisbon a couple of times, got nothing back from them. We found another little museum, got nothing back from them. So I found this museum in Ilhavo, contacted them, immediately heard back from them. They were blown away that this museum in Virginia in the United States had a casadera just like they have in their museum. And so we asked and said, well, we've got all these different things. What are they called? All this kind of stuff. And so finally I said, hey, I am really wondering why we have this system here. This doesn't make any sense to us. Tell us about it. And they said, well, and our assumption is you build the frame, you put the sides on, you put the bottom on, you paint it, throw it in the water, and you go. Exactly the opposite we find out. They build the sides, they build the bottom, and then they put the frames in. And the reason the scarves are alternate like that is so that you get the shape of the boat right, and you can move the individual upright just enough to get the perfect shape. And so they put the frame together after they've built the boat, and we're like, unbelievable. So now we've got this very, very interesting boat with a unique structure and a unique building pattern to it that we have no other example like that in the collection. And we've unlocked now the story of this boat. And we've created a partner in the curatorial staff at the Ilhavo Museum, which none of us have been to, none of us have actually ever visited, but we have this now partnership with this museum just based on us trying to figure out their material culture and something from their heritage in a way that, now we can tell people about. So it was really, really enlightening for us and exciting for us. And this is the kind of thing that we're doing with everything in the collection. It's going to take a few minutes, maybe another 100 years, so I won't be around to see the ultimate end of it. But this is the process that we're now employing across the board with our curatorial staff, whether it's a piece of scrimshaw, a boat, a painting, a photograph, a document, doesn't matter. This is the process that we're following, always asking why. Have we found out everything about this? Not even close, because the more you ask questions, you'll get answers, but then there are also more questions. And that's the really exciting process about all this. So, now, back to the museum. I want to talk a little bit about cabinets of curiosities. Has anybody ever heard this term before? It's a museum practice. It's 16th century kind of a museum way of exhibition and display. This is actually one of the earliest views of what's called the Cabinet of Curiosities from 1599. And what it was people would collect things and they would put them all over a room. And sometimes it would be in an actual cabinet, and that was sort of how they got the name Cabinet of Curiosities. But they were natural and artificial curiosities that people collected. Sometimes it was ship captains or merchants or people who traveled, people of wealth, and they had all of these oddities, and then they would entertain their friends, and people would come by. And so you can kind of see how something like this would turn into a museum. Especially the alligator on the ceiling. I love that. That's just how they got it up there. And then these guys are with their fancy pantaloons or whatever you call those pants, sitting there looking at all these different birds and animals. But natural history museums grew straight out of what is called the Cabinet of Curiosities. So I want to talk to you about two places. Both of them happen to be maritime museums. And I've kind of titled this a little bit, Collecting the Globe, because both museums, the Peabody-Essex Museum and the Mariners Museum, collected the globe. This is one of the few museums, both of these, where you can experience the world in that place. A lot of maritime museums are going to be focused very regionally on the particular area where they're at, maybe nationally. But our two museums have this unique collection that represents places from all over the world. It happens to be Mariners and Peabody-Essex. Peabody-Essex Museum began as the East India Marine Society in 1799. It was founded by ship owners, captains, and merchants from Salem. And everywhere they went, they would collect natural and artificial curiosities, and they would bring them back, and the paper would publish, Benjamin Shreve just returned from Russia and Sumatra and has brought a number of things. And so everybody in Salem would we got to go down to the museum and see what Benjamin Shreve brought back from Russia and all these different places. And so that's how the museum formed. And Salem was one of the great preeminent ports up until about the 1860s in the United States. And so the trade with Salem was all over the world. And the same sort of thing happened in Newport News, as we'll see in a little bit. But the ship captains and the ship owners would bring all of these things in there and they built a hall in 1826, and this was the original design for it. And you can see there were fireplaces. There are canoes from Maine. This figure here in the center was a carved god from Hawaii. And all of these cabinets had things in there. And there were portraits. There were war clubs from Fiji and New Caledonia. And so you could actually come into the museum and take a voyage around the world. And it was a very, very special place. This is the same hall. This is around 1915, and you can see the whale jaw here. And this is the floor here. This is the second level, and these are all just different specimens of the natural history collection. And you can see even on this railing here, these flat cabinets with stuff in them. And everything, there was no such thing as storage. Everything was out. Everything was visible. Everything even just had a number and an identification of what it was. It's a mollusk shell from the Sumatran Islands in Indonesia. Nothing more than that. But you could spend days and hours in here looking at everything. This is the bottom floor, and all of these portraits were of Salem ship captains and ship owners. And you can almost not see any wall structure behind that. And if you could see wall structure, that meant, well, if we've got something this big, we got a place for it. And so that's where it went. You see over here This turtle, when I started working there, the turtle had been in the collection for over 100 years, and it was the shell. It's a I can't remember the exact type of turtle, but the shell was still oozing oil out of that, and we had to replace the little pad underneath the tail because it would drip oil that was still leaching from the turtle, and the thing had been dead for 100 years. But a fascinating place. And this is a great slide. This is in that same room, and this A-frame, and they've got a kayak from Greenland. They've got a canoe from Maine right in here. They've got a canoe from the South Pacific. This right here, this is a little box called a palanquin, and it's got a post here and a post at the back. And a young Chinese lady would ride in the palanquin and be carried along by people on either end. And it's just there. Everything. There's a model here at the top of the USS Constitution that was actually built on board the Constitution when Isaac Hull was captain. So just this mishmash of stuff, but it was just a wonderful experience to go in there and see all of this stuff together. Whoops, there we go. So that museum opened in 1799, had been around for 130 years when the Mariners Museum was founded in 1930. And, all right, come on. Okay, so now you can see a lot of similarity between the displays. You've got paintings, and you've got things from the whaling industry, stamps here. You've got a tripod and the implements for whaling. All of the globes and the binnacles and the carvings and the paintings up here on the wall. Everything is just, look at the half models in the background of the. Now, this right here is, if you know the Great Hall there, this is the door that goes into the admin area. The Crabtree collection entrance is down here. Of course, up here now, where the Skinner paintings are, is where the AC-72 is. But we had half models going all the way up to the ceiling. Even these small things that you really couldn't tell, what they were without some sort of key. But here are all of the Adney canoe models here. The bull boat that's out in the small craft collection. You've got the Skinner paintings of the shipyard from the 30s. You've got the Battle of Hampton Roads right here. So just this incredible collection, all out and visible. The painting of Columbus that used to be at the start of the Age of Exploration gallery, and all of our models along through here, and one of the globes from the collection right here. There we go. Now, this is a really cool picture. We didn't even bother with the fancy cases that we have now that create microclimates. It was just sawhorses with a plank of wood on there, and you could put a model, you could put a few lanterns, you could put a couple of things down below it. It was stable, but all of these sawhorses over here, and you'll notice this huge ship model here in the back, 7-masted schooner. There's also a Skinner painting of this schooner in dry dock at the shipyard. This is the Thomas W. Lawson, and you might not know this. This is an interesting fact, and I'll give you this one for free too. So you've got a regular ship, say 3 masts, foremast, mainmast, mizzenmast. What do you do when you've got 7? Well, starting from the front and working to the back, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That was the name of the masts. So that's back there. And if you look right here, you see a door and a door here, and this opening goes right back to the library and archives of the day. So everything was right there. The whale boat that's out in the small craft collection, and some of the figureheads and paintings and things from the collection. Just a wonderful menagerie of our collection. So what we are thinking, and the way that we're thinking now, that we're not doing traditional exhibitions, which takes a theme and a set of objects, and we're going to talk about this one point. So one of the things as I've come up through exhibitions and doing exhibitions is that an exhibition has to be about one thing, okay? It's about this, which means if it's about these two things, it's not about these other 98 things. As great as they are, it has nothing to do with that, because if you put 100 objects in an exhibition, there are then going to be 100 things written about those 100 objects. That's 200 things that someone could read. So if someone walks through and only looks at one object and reads one label, they need to be able to cognitively understand what the thrust of that exhibition is, right? So you are editing immediately from the get-go a lot of information about any one particular object that you've selected to fulfill what it is that thematically you're trying to get across in that exhibition, leaving out the possibility for a lot of shared and lived experiences, for that object or a set of objects to mean something to a segment of the community that you're actually trying to design an exhibition for. So you're self-selecting from the get-go information that you're presenting. Well, Cabinet of Curiosities doesn't care anything about that. It's just putting everything out in front of people and allowing them the experience to come through and enjoy and be able to put together all of these things that have some sort of maritime connection and some sort of maritime meaning. Because what are we all about? We are about our shared maritime heritage. And that's where this all starts to come together. So, man, this thing has really got a squeak going on up here. I don't know if you can hear it, but I thought it was me for a minute, but it's the wood. We had an opportunity to visit two places in the Netherlands while we were there for the International Congress of Maritime Museums. One was the Maritime Museum in Rotterdam, and one was the Depot Museum. And I'm not going to tell you what the name of the Depot Museum actually is, because it's all in Dutch, and I would butcher it if I attempted to say that. And they are dealing and starting to work with this idea of a new type of Cabinet of Curiosities. And this is at the Maritime Museum in Rotterdam, and you can see that they've just got this collection of things like it would be in storage, models and paintings and photographs and all this sort of thing, and they've sort of decorated with wood accents. It's really kind of a cool thing. It's up on the third floor of their exhibition space. It's really nice. It has a kind of a neat feel to it. I did find after a while that the wood kind of got in the way of it's a little bit distracting, but it's a nice attempt. We were able to walk through, get some ideas of what would work for us if we attempted something like this, and the things that actually don't. Now, the Depot is this fancy building that just opened about 2 years ago, not far from the Maritime Museum in Rotterdam. And it's next to the Art Museum. So this is actually a building designed as visible storage, that you can actually come in and look behind the scenes and see all the collection of this art museum. It's a very, very intriguing place, a very space age kind of thing. And when you walk in, you can push a button on the wall and the light will turn on in this storage space, and you can look through the glass and you can see the painting storage. And then you can turn on another light and you can look into some of the object storage areas. A very, very modern architectural space, really, really interesting, but it's done in a way that complements the art museum. Like if you go into an art museum, the antithesis of display in an art museum is exactly the opposite of a Cabinet of Curiosities. They want a painting on the wall and tons of space around it, so it's all contemplative and you can focus on this and all these sort of things. So there's all this wall space and one little painting or one little photograph. And so all of their collection now is over in these areas. So to really experience this, you have to go on a tour with a curator or a conservator. And once you go through this, you spend, I think, 12 minutes in each one of these compartments. And then the next 49 minutes allows the room to recoup all of the air and the temperature from the number of people that go through there on this tour to maintain the stability of the collection. So some good ideas in both places that we are thinking about. So back to the International Small Craft Center. We've actually been doing accessible storage and visible storage for 22 years now with the Small Craft Center. Designed this in 2002. And we have now 150 boats in the collection, over 150 boats from 43 different countries around the world. So what we did was to put some context around that, which you didn't get in the first iteration of the collection, and you don't always get a context with some of the visible storage either. And so we wanted people to be able to walk in who didn't know or care anything about boats and start to put some things together in their mind. They look the way they do based on the environment that they're used, the culture that made them, the materials that were available, and the purpose for which they were designed. So gathering sustenance or conveyance or pleasure and adventure, or they were experimental or for racing. Each one of those has different characteristics. And so then we also decided, well, let's build a ramp so that you can actually look down into some of them. And so we gave up a lot of real estate where we could display more boats in order to allow people the ability to look into some of them and see them from different perspectives. And so you've got different heights and this sort of thing. So we've actually been doing this testing and this type of display. This is not an exhibition by any stretch of the imagination, because we saved that little area up front with the wood floor to be our exhibition space, right? So we'll take a boat up there, we'll do a little bit of label text, and we'll do all this sort of interpretation around it. But for the most part, the boats exist in and of themselves in this space where they would have no relationship to any other boat that they're paired with. You've got a boat here from Maryland. This is from Norway. This is from Italy, this is from the Solomon Islands, this is from Vietnam, and this is from Massachusetts. Never would these have come into contact, now maybe not never, but rarely would they have ever come into contact with one another in the maritime world, except in a museum. And so these are all about boats that convey. It's all about conveyance. And so you can look at the different shapes and the different materials and the different regional aspects there. And so then we also put the flags in there, because as we were putting this all together and everything looked great on paper, I realized we had nearly every shade of brown that one could imagine, and we were going to have to do something to break up the brown. And so we added the flags in there of all the nations of boats that were represented. So this is what we are doing now with our galleries. We're going back to this cabinet of curiosities idea with some refinements, with some more information. We're making the collection more accessible, but we're also making the body of knowledge about that collection more accessible, so that anybody that's really interested in figureheads, or really interested in nautical instruments, or really interested in chairs or figureheads can see that, but then also learn more about each individual piece. We have talked for years that the Mariners Museum's collection, you get to see about 3 or 4% of it on display at any one time, which means 96 to 97, if my math is correct, is in storage. And when you take someone through the galleries versus when you take them through storage, it's a much different experience. I'd much rather spend my time taking someone through storage and seeing all the stuff that's behind the walls back there. And so now we're bringing all that out. We're trying to capture that sort of special feeling that you get when you're behind behind the walls and into storage. And that's why something like the Cunard liner of Queen Elizabeth actually makes sense now. With all of this stuff around it, we were all concerned that, well, if we pull all this stuff from Boiler Row 5 and we put it in, we got figureheads and chairs and sea chests. Has nothing to do with the Queen Elizabeth. But when you think about it, from the standpoint of creating a new and modern and reimagined cabinet of curiosities, it fits perfectly. You don't have to justify it. It's just part of our collection. And we can say, if you've got something in this gallery, oh, by the way, we've just pulled some china out and it's in another gallery that happened to be on there. You can start to put these things together as you walk through the museum, and it becomes an entirely new type of experience, and one that very few places are experimenting with or even thinking about. Every place that we talked to someone from at Congress this year was, hey, what's your new exhibition? Hey, what is your new exhibition? Hey, what's your new exhibition about? And it was all these themed sort of things. Like, man, well, I'm not doing an exhibition. We're doing something completely different. We're pulling our storage into our gallery spaces, pulling our collection out, learning what we actually have in our collection that we haven't seen and that the public hasn't seen in many, many years. And so it's really, really exciting. And it's opened us up to a whole new creative way about how to get the body of knowledge of this stuff out and digestible and accessible to the public. And so you've seen the new, if you were in that in Gallery 3, this is going to be filled with paintings. And so we're, at the same time we're trying to get more and more things out, we're also making very sure that the climate that each of these things is stored in is appropriate, protected, and provides for the longevity of this collection far beyond our own lives and our own time here in the 2020s, it's already that late, here at Mariners. And so I just want to wrap up back at this slide of the story and all of the major components that go into that as we think about these areas that we have of excellence, centers of excellence in our collection, and as we learn more about them. And we have a team of curators. I don't have curators of fine and decorative arts. We don't have a curator of small craft anymore. We are all generalists because we all have the responsibility for everything in the collection. Whaling, scrimshaw, photography, boats, uniforms, buttons, tools, everything. And so it's our responsibility to learn all about that and to build that body of knowledge for our community. And so that's really, really an exciting thing for us because this is something that no other museum is practicing at the moment, and jumping out into without a safety net. And as Howard and I like to say, we're building the airplane as we're flying it. And we're literally doing that, and it's an incredible experience. And I think by the time 2030 rolls around and a lot more of this is happening and got a little bit more sophistication around it, that this idea of the Cabinet of Curiosities in the 21st century is going to be something that other museums are now emulating what's going on at the Mariners Museum. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope it's been enjoyable. I hope you've got a better sense of our collection and what we're doing and why we are going down this pathway, and sort of helping put some of what you've seen tonight in galleries 2 and 3 and 4 and what you can expect to see more of heading into the future.
Oh.